George shuffled the cards noisily and dealt them. Whit drew a scoring board to him and set the pegs to start. Whit said, "I guess you guys really come here to work." "How do you mean?" George asked. Whit laughed. "Well, you come on a Friday. You got 2 days to work till Sunday." "I don't see how you figure," said George. Whit laughed again. "You do if you've been around these big ranches much. Guy that wants to look over a ranch comes in Saturday afternoon. He gets Saturday night supper and 3 meals on Sunday, and he can quit Monday morning after breakfast without turning his hand. But you come to work Friday noon. You got to put in a day and a half no matter how you figure." George looked at him levelly. "We're going to stick around a while," he said. "Me and Lenny's going to roll up a steak." The door opened quietly, and the stable buck put in his head. A lean Negro head lined with pain, the eyes patient. "Mr. Slim?" Slim took his eyes from old Candy. "Huh? Oh, hello, Crooks. What's the matter?" "You told me to warm up tar for that mule's foot. I got it warm." "Oh, sure, Crooks. I'll come right out and put it on." "I can do it if you want, Mr. Slim." "No, I'll come do it myself." He stood up. Crooks said, "Mr. Slim?" "Yeah." "That big new guy's messing around your pups out in the barn." "Well, he ain't doing no harm. I give him one of them pups." "Just thought I'd tell you," said Crooks. "He's taking 'em out's the nest and handling 'em. That won't do 'em no good." "Well, he won't hurt 'em," said Slim. "I'll come along with you now." George looked up. "The crazy bastard's fooling around too much. Just kick him out, Slim." Slim followed the stable buck out of the room. George dealt, and Whit picked up his cards and examined them. "Seen the new kid yet?" he asked. "What kid?" George asked. "Why, Curly's new wife." "Yeah, I seen her." "Well, ain't she a Lulu?" "I ain't seen that much of her," said George. Whit laid down his cards impressively. "Well, stick around and keep your eyes open. You'll see plenty. She ain't concealing nothing. I never seen nobody like her. She got the eye going all the time on everybody. I bet she even gives a stable buck the eye. I don't know what the hell she wants." George asked casually, "Been any trouble since she got here?" It was obvious that Whit was not interested in his cards. He laid his hand down, and George scooped it in. George laid out his deliberate solitaire hand, 7 cards, and 6 on top, and 5 on top of those. Whit said, "I see what you mean, but no, there ain't been nothing yet. Curly's got yellow jackets in his drawers, but that's all so far. Every time the guys is around, she shows up. She's looking for Curly, or she thought she left something laying around, and she's looking for it. Seems like she can't keep away from guys, and Curly's pants is just crawling with ants, but there ain't nothing come of it yet." George said, "She's going to make a mess. There's going to be a bad mess about her. She's a jailbait, all set on the trigger. That Curly got his work cut out for him. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it ain't no place for a girl, especially like her." Whit said, "If you got ideas, you ought to come in town with us to Guy's tomorrow night." "Why, what's doing?" "Oh, just the usual thing. We go into old Susie's place. Hell of a nice place. Old Susie's a laugh, always cracking jokes. Like she says when we come up on the front porch last Saturday night. Susie opens the door, and then she yells over her shoulder, 'Get your coats on, girls. Here comes the sheriff.' She never talks dirty, neither. Got 5 girls there." "What's it set you back?" George asked. 2.5. You can get a shot for 2 hits. Susie got nice chairs to sit in, too. If a guy don't want to flop, why, he can just sit in the chairs and have a couple or 3 shots and pass the time of day, and Susie don't give a damn. She ain't rushing guys through and kicking 'em out if they don't want to flop." "I might go in and look the joint over," said George. "Sure, come along. It's a hell of a lot of fun, her cracking jokes all the time. Like she says one time, she says, 'I've knew people that if they got a rag rug on the floor and a Cupid doll lamp on the phonograph, they think they're running a parlor house.' That's Clara's house she's talking about. And Susie says, 'I know what you boys want.' She says, 'My girls is clean.' She says, 'And there ain't no water in my whiskey.' She says, 'If any of you guys want to look at a Cupid doll lamp and take your own chance getting burned, then, why, you know where to go.' And she says, 'There's guys around here walking bow-legged 'cause they like to look at a Cupid doll lamp.'" George asked, "Clara runs the other house, huh?" "Yeah," said Whit. "We don't ever go there. Clara gets $3 a crack and 35 cents a shot, and she don't crack no jokes. But Susie's place is clean. She got nice chairs. Don't let no goo-goos in, neither." "Well, me and Lenny's rolling up a steak," said George. "I might go in and set and have a shot, but I ain't putting out no 2.5. "Well, a guy gotta have fun sometime," said Whit. The door opened, and Letty and Carlson came in together. Lenny crept to his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson reached under his bunk and brought out his bag. He didn't look at old Canty, who still faced the wall. Carlson found a little cleaning rod in the bag and a can of oil. He laid them on his bed and then brought out the pistol, took out the magazine, and snapped the loaded shell from the chamber. Then he fell to cleaning the barrel with the little rod. When the ejector snapped, Canty turned over and looked for a moment at the gun before he turned back to the wall again. Carlson said casually, "Curly been in yet?" "No," said Whit. "What's eating on Curly?" Carlson squinted down the barrel of his gun. "Looking for his old lady. I seen him going round and round outside." Whit said sarcastically, "He spends half his time looking for her, and the rest of the time she's looking for him." Curly burst into the room excitedly. "Any of you guys seen my wife?" he demanded. "She ain't been here," said Whit. Curly looked threateningly about the room. "Where the hell's Slim?" "Went out in the barn," said George. "He was going to put some tar on a split hoof." Curly's shoulders dropped and squared. "How long ago did he go?" 5-10 minutes." Curly jumped out the door and banged it after him. Whit stood up. "I guess maybe I'd like to see this," he said. "Curly's just spoiling her. He wouldn't start for Slim. And Curly's handy, goddamn handy. Got in the finals for the Golden Gloves. He got newspaper clippings about it." He considered. "But just the same, he better leave Slim alone. Nobody don't know what Slim can do." "Thinks Slim's with his wife, don't he?" said George. "Looks like it," Whit said. "Course Slim ain't. Least, I don't think Slim is. But I like to see the fuss if it comes off. Come on, let's go." George said, "I'm staying right here. I don't want to get mixed up in nothing. Lenny and me gotta make a stake." Carlson finished the cleaning of the gun and put it in the bag and pushed the bag under his bunk. "I guess I'll go out and look her over," he said. Old Canty lay still, and Lenny from his bunk watched George cautiously. When Whit and Carlson were gone and the door closed after them, George turned to Lenny. "What you got on your mind?" "I ain't done nothing, George. Slim says I better not pet them pups so much for a while. Slim says it ain't good for them, so I come right in. I been good, George." "I could have told you that," said George. "Well, I wasn't hurting 'em none. I just had mine in my lap petting it." George asked, "Did you see Slim out in the barn?" "Sure he did. He told me I better not pet that pup no more." "Did you see that girl?" "You mean Curly's girl?" "Yeah. Did she come in the barn?" "No. Anyways, I never seen her." "You never seen Slim talking to her?" She ain't been in the barn." "Okay," said George. "I guess them guys ain't gonna see no fight. If there's any fighting, Lenny, you keep out of it." "I don't want no fights," said Lenny. He got up from his bunk and sat down at the table across from George. Almost automatically, George shuffled the cards and laid out his solitaire hand. He used a deliberate, thoughtful slowness. Lenny reached for a face card and studied it, then turned it upside down and studied it. "Both ends the same," he said. "George, why is both ends the same?" "I don't know," said George. "That's just the way they make 'em. What was Slim doing in the barn when you seen him?" "Slim?" "Sure. You seen him in the barn, and he told you not to pet the pup so much." "Oh, yeah. He had a can of tar and a paintbrush. I don't know what for." "You sure that girl didn't come in like she come in here today?" "No, she never come." George sighed. "You give me a good whorehouse every time," he said. "Guy can go in and get drunk and get everything out of his system all at once and no messes, and he knows how much it's going to set him back. These here jailbaits is just set on the trigger of the hoosgow." Lenny followed his words admiringly and moved his lips a little to keep up. George continued, "You remember Andy Cushman, Lenny, went to grammar school?" The one that his old lady used to make hot cakes for the kids?" Lenny asked. "Yeah, that's the one. You can remember anything if there's anything to eat in it." George looked carefully at the solitaire hand. He put an ace up on his scoring rack and piled 2, 3, and 4 of diamonds on it. "Little Andy's in San Quentin right now on account of a tart," said George. Lenny drummed on the table with his fingers. "George?" "Huh?" "George, how long's it going to be till we get that little place and live on the fat of the land and rabbits?" "I don't know," said George. "We gotta get a big stake together. I know a little place we can get cheap, but they ain't giving it away." Old Canty turned slowly over. His eyes were wide open. He watched George carefully. Lenny said, "Oh, tell about that place, George." "I just told you last night." Go on, tell again, George. Well, it's 10 acres, said George. Got a little windmill, got a little shack on it, and a chicken run. Got a kitchen, orchard, cherries, apples, peaches, lots, nuts, got a few berries. There's a place for alfalfa and plenty water to flood it. There's a pig pen. And rabbits, George? Well, no place for rabbits now, but I could easily build a few hutches, and you could feed alfalfa to the rabbits. Damn right I could, said Lenny. You goddamn right I could. George's hand stopped working with the cards. His voice was growing warmer. And we could have a few pigs. I could build a smokehouse like the one Grandpa had, and when we kill a pig, we can smoke the bacon and the hams and make sausage and all like that. And when the salmon run up river, we could catch 100 of 'em, salt 'em down or smoke 'em. We could have them for breakfast. Ain't nothing so nice as smoked salmon. When the fruit come in, we can can it, and tomatoes, they're easy to can. Every Sunday we'd kill a chicken or a rabbit. Maybe we'd have a cow or a goat, and the cream's so goddamn thick you gotta cut it with a knife and take it out with a spoon. Lenny watched him with wide eyes, and old Candy watched him too. Lenny said softly, "We can live off the fat of the land." "Sure," said George. "All kinds of vegetables in the garden, and if we want a little whiskey, we can sell a few eggs or something, or some milk. We just live there. We belong there. There wouldn't be no more running around the country and getting fed by a Jap cook. No, sir, we'd have our own place where we belonged, and not sleep in no bunkhouse." "Tell about the house, George," Lenny begged. "Sure, we'd have a little house and a room to ourselves, little fat iron stove, and in the winter we'd keep a fire going in it. It ain't enough land, so we'd have to work too hard, maybe 6, 7 hours a day. We wouldn't have to buck no barley 11 hours a day, and when we'd put a crop, why, we'd be there to take the crop up. We'd know what coming of our planting." "And rabbits," Lenny said eagerly, "and I take care of 'em. Tell how I do that, George." "Sure. Well, you'd go out in the alfalfa patch, and you'd have a sack, and you'd fill up the sack and bring it in and put it in the rabbit cages." "They nibble and they nibble," said Lenny, "the way they do. I've seen 'em. Every 6 weeks or so," George continued, "them does would throw a litter, so we'd have plenty rabbits to eat and to sell. And we'd keep a few pigeons to go flying around the windmill like they done when I was a kid." He looked raptly at the wall over Lenny's head. "And it'd be our own, and nobody could can us. If we don't like a guy, we can say, 'Get the hell out.' By God, he's got to do it. And if a friend come along, why, we'd have an extra bunk, and we'd say, 'Why don't you spend the night?' And by God, he would. We'd have a setter dog and a couple of striped cats, but you gotta watch out them cats don't get the little rabbits." Lenny breathed hard. "You just let them try and get the rabbits. I'll break their goddamn necks. I'll smash 'em with a stick." He subsided, grumbling to himself, threatening the future cats which might dare to disturb the future rabbits. George sat entranced with his own picture. When Candy spoke, they both jumped as though they had been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, "You know where's a place like that?" George was on guard immediately. "Suppose I do," he said. "What's that to you?" "Oh, you don't need to tell me where it's at. It might be any place." "Sure," said George, "that's right. You couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly. "How much they want for a place like that?" George watched him suspiciously. "Well, I could get it for $600. The old people that owns it is flat bust, and the old lady needs an operation. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us." Candy said, "I ain't much good with only one hand. I lost my hand right here on this ranch. That's why they give me a job swamping. And they give me $250 because I lost my hand, and I got 50 more saved up right in the bank right now. That's 300, and I got 50 more coming at the end of the month. I tell you what," he leaned forward eagerly, "suppose I went in with you guys. That's $350 I put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be?" George half closed his eyes. "I gotta think about that, and we was always going to do it by ourselves." Candy interrupted him. "I'll make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, 'cause I ain't got no relatives or nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do it right now." George spat on the floor disgustedly. "We got $10 between us." Then he said thoughtfully, "Look, if me and Lenny work a month and don't spend nothing, we'll have $100. That'd be $450. I bet we could swing her for that. Then you and Lenny could go get her started, and I'd get a job and make up the rest, and you could sell eggs and stuff like that." They fell into a silence. They looked at one another amazed. This thing they had never really believed in was coming true. George said reverently, "Jesus Christ, I bet we could swing her." His eyes were full of wonder. "I bet we could swing her," he repeated softly. Candy sat on the edge of his bunk. He scratched the stump of his wrist nervously. "I got hurt 4 years ago," he said. "Hand me pretty soon. Just as soon as I can't swamp out no bunkhouses, they'll put me on the county. Maybe if I give you guys my money, you'll let me hoe in the garden even after I ain't no good at it, and I'll wash dishes and little chicken stuff like that, but I'll be on our own place and I'll be let to work on our own place," he said miserably. "You seen what they done to my dog tonight? They says he wasn't no good to himself nor nobody else. When they can me here, I wish somebody'd shoot me. But they won't do nothing like that. I won't have no place to go, and I can't get no more jobs. I'll have $30 more coming time you guys is ready to quit." George stood up. "We'll do her," he said. "We'll fix up that little old place and we'll go live there." He sat down again. They all sat still, all bemused by the beauty of the thing. Each mind was popped into the future when this lovely thing should come about. George said wonderingly, "Suppose there was a carnival or a circus come to town, or a ball game or any damn thing." Old Candy nodded in appreciation of the idea. "We'd just go to her," George said. "We wouldn't ask nobody if we could. Just say, 'We'll go to her,' and we would. Just milk the cow and sling some grain to the chickens and go to her." "And put some grass to the rabbits," Lenny broke in. "I wouldn't never forget to feed them. When we gonna do it, George?" "In 1 month. Right squack in 1 month. Know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna write to them old people that owns the place that will take her, and Candy'll send $100 to bind her." "I sure will," said Candy. "They got a good stove there?" "Sure got a nice stove. Burns coal or wood." "I'm gonna take my pup," said Lenny. "I bet by Christ he likes it there, by Jesus." Voices were approaching from outside. George said quickly, "Don't tell nobody about it. Just us 3 and nobody else. They're liable to can us if we can't make no stake. Just go on like we was gonna buck barley the rest of our lives, then all of a sudden some day we'll get our pay and scram out of here." Lenny and Candy nodded, and they were grinning with delight. "Don't tell nobody," Lenny said to himself. Candy said, "George, I ought to have shot that dog myself, George. I should not ought no let no stranger shoot my dog." The door opened. Slim came in, followed by Curly and Carlson and Whit. Slim's hands were black with tar, and he was scowling. Curly hung close to his elbow. Curly said, "Well, I didn't mean nothing, Slim. I just asked you." Slim said, "Well, you've been asking me too often, and I'm getting goddamn sick of it. If you can't look after your own goddamn wife, what you expect me to do about it? You lay off of me." "I'm just trying to tell you I didn't mean nothing," said Curly. "I just thought you might have saw her." "Why don't you tell her to stay the hell home where she belongs?" said Carlson. "You let her hang around bunkhouses, and pretty soon you're going to have something on your hands, and you won't be able to do nothing about it." Curly whirled on Carlson. "You keep out of this lest you want to step outside." Carlson laughed. "You goddamn punk," he said. "You tried to throw a scare into Slim, and you couldn't make it stick. Slim throwed a scare into you. You're yellow as a frog belly. I don't care if you're the best welter in the country. You come for me, and I'll kick your goddamn head off." Candy joined the attack with joy. Full of Vaseline," he said disgustedly. Curly glared at him. His eyes slipped on past and lighted on Lenny, and Lenny was still smiling with delight at the memory of the ranch. Curly stepped over to Lenny like a terrier. "What the hell you laughing at?" Lenny looked blankly at him. "Huh?" Then Curly's rage exploded. "Come on, you big bastard, get up on your feet. No big son of a bitch is gonna laugh at me. I'll show you who's yellow." Lenny looked helplessly at George, and then he got up and tried to retreat. Curly was balanced and poised. He slashed at Lenny with his left and then smashed down his nose with the right. Lenny gave a cry of terror. Blood welled up in his nose. "George!" he cried. "Make him let me alone, George!" He backed until he was against the wall, and Curly followed, slugging him in the face. Lenny's hands remained at his sides. He was too frightened to defend himself. George was on his feet, yelling, "Get him, Lenny! Don't let him do it!" Lenny covered his face with his huge paws and bleated with terror. He cried, "Make him stop, George!" Then Curly attacked his stomach and cut off his wind. Slim jumped up. "The dirty little rat!" he cried. "I'll get him myself." George put out his hand and grabbed Slim. "Wait a minute," he shouted. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Get him, Lenny!" Lenny took his hands away from his face and looked about for George, and Curly slashed at his eyes. The big face was covered with blood. George yelled again, "I said, get him!" Curly's fist was swinging when Lenny reached for it. The next minute, Curly was flopping like a fish in a line, and his closed fist was lost in Lenny's big hand. George ran down the room. "Let go of him, Lenny, let go!" But Lenny watched in terror, the flopping little man whom he held. Blood ran down Lenny's face. One of his eyes was cut and closed. George slapped him in the face again, and still Lenny held on to the closed fist. Curly was white and shrunken by now, and his struggling had become weak. He stood crying, his fist lost in Lenny's paw. George shouted over and over, "Let go his hand, Lenny. Let go, Slim. Come help me with the guy. Come help me while the guy got any hand left." Suddenly, Lenny let go his hold. His crouch cowering against the wall. "You told me to, George," he said miserably. Curly sat down on the floor, looking in wonder at his crushed hand. Slim and Carlson bent over him. Then Slim straightened up and regarded Lenny with horror. "We gotta get him to a doctor," he said. "Looks to me like every bone in his hand is bust." "I didn't want to," Lenny cried. "I didn't want to hurt him." Slim said, "Carlson, you get the candy wagon hitched up, and we'll take him into Soledad and get him fixed up." Carlson hurried out. Slim turned to the whimpering Lenny. "It ain't your fault," he said. "This punk sure had it coming to him, but Jesus, he ain't hardly got no hand left." Slim hurried out and in a moment returned with a tin cup of water. He held it to Curly's lips. George said, "Slim, will we get canned now? We need the steak. Will Curly's old man can us now?" Slim smiled wryly. He knelt down beside Curly. "You got your senses in hand enough to listen?" he asked. Curly nodded. "Well, then listen," Slim went on. "I think you got your hand caught in a machine. If you don't tell nobody what happened, we ain't going to. But you just tell and try to get this guy canned, and we'll tell everybody, and then we'll get you the laugh." "I won't tell," said Curly. He avoided looking at Lenny. Buggy wheels sounded outside. Slim helped Curly up. "Come on now. Carlson's going to take you to a doctor." He helped Curly out the door. The sound of wheels drew away. In a moment, Slim came back into the bunkhouse. He looked at Lenny, still crouched fearfully against the wall. "Let's see your hands," he asked. Lenny stuck out his hands. "Christ almighty, I hate to have you mad at me," Slim said. George broke in. "Lenny was just scared," he explained. "He didn't know what to do. I told you nobody ought never to fight him. Oh, I guess it was Candy I told." Candy nodded solemnly. "That's just what you done," he said. "Right this morning, when Curly first lit into your friend, you says he better not fool with Lenny if he knows what's good for him. That's just what you says to me." George turned to Lenny. "It ain't your fault," he said. "You don't need to be scared no more. You done just what I told you to. Maybe you better go in the washroom and clean up your face. You look like hell." Lenny smiled with his bruised mouth. "I didn't want no trouble," he said. He walked toward the door, but just before he came to it, he turned back. "George, what you want?" "I can still tend the rabbits, George?" "Sure. You ain't done nothing wrong." "I didn't mean no harm, George." "Well, get the hell out and wash your face."